I still remember the exact moment my childhood ended. It was October 15th, 1983, and I was supposed to be on that bus. My name is Sarah, and what I'm about to tell you happened in my hometown of Briarwood, a place so small that everyone knew everyone, where the biggest news was usually who won the pie contest at the county fair. But 40 years ago, something happened here that changed everything. Something that still haunts me every single day. You see, I was 8 years old when 23 children and their bus driver vanished without a trace. One moment they were there, the next, gone. No bodies, no wreckage, no explanation. Just an empty road, and families torn apart by questions that had no answers. I should have been child number 24, but I wasn't. And the guilt of that has followed me for 4 decades, until 3 months ago when a drone pilot captured something that made my blood run cold. Something that proved everything we thought we knew about that day was wrong. Let me take you back to the beginning, to that crisp October morning when the leaves were just starting to turn and the air smelled like wood smoke and possibility. I was Sarah Mitchell then, just a kid with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, living in a world where the worst thing that could happen was forgetting your lunch money. Mr. Tom Edwards had been driving bus number 5 for 23 years. He knew every pothole on Miller's Bend, every stop sign, every house where a kid might be running late. More than that, he knew us. He knew that Jenny Crawford always sat in the third seat and drew pictures of horses. He knew that little Marcus Thompson was afraid of the dark and needed extra time getting on the bus in the mornings. He knew that the Henderson twins, Amy and Alice, always shared their snacks with anyone who looked hungry. Mr. Tom was more than our bus driver. He was our guardian angel, our protector, the steady presence who made sure we got to school safe and sound every single day. He had salt and pepper hair and these kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, which was often. He'd been married for 35 years to his wife Eleanor, had 3 grown children of his own, and treated every kid on that bus like they were his own grandchildren. The morning of October 15th started like any other. I woke up to the sound of my mother making breakfast downstairs, the smell of bacon and coffee drifting up to my room. I got dressed in my favorite purple sweater, the one with the little flowers on it, and headed downstairs with my backpack. But then I started coughing. Not just a little cough, but one of those deep, rattling coughs that makes your chest hurt. My mother took one look at me and shook her head. "You're staying home today, Sarah," she said, pressing her hand to my forehead. "You're burning up." I protested, of course. We had a spelling test that day, and I'd studied so hard. Plus, it was Friday, which meant we'd probably watch a movie in the afternoon if we were good. But my mother's word was final. She called the school, made me some tea with honey, and tucked me into bed with a stack of books. Through my bedroom window, I watched bus number 5 pull up to the Hendersons' house across the street. I saw Amy and Alice climb aboard, their blonde hair catching the morning sun. I saw Jenny Crawford with her art supplies, and Marcus Thompson clutching his favorite toy car. 23 children in all, ages 6 to 12, heading off to what should have been just another ordinary day at Briarwood Elementary. I watched that yellow bus disappear around the corner, and I felt sorry for myself. I had no idea I was watching my friends vanish forever. The first sign something was wrong came around 10 o'clock. Mrs. Patterson, the secretary at Briarwood Elementary, called my mother. "Has Sarah's bus arrived yet?" she asked. "Bus number 5 never showed up this morning." My mother frowned. "That's odd. I saw it leave the neighborhood right on time." "Well, it never made it here. We've called the transportation office, but they can't reach Mr. Tom on the radio." At first, nobody panicked. Bus breakdowns happened. Maybe Mr. Tom had pulled over to help someone, or maybe there was a problem with the engine. The school sent out the backup bus to pick up any kids who might be stranded along the route. But the backup bus found nothing. No broken down bus, no children waiting by the roadside, no sign that bus number 5 had ever existed. By noon, the police were involved. By 2 o'clock, search teams were forming. By sunset, helicopters were circling overhead with searchlights, and everyone in Briarwood was either out looking or gathered in the school gymnasium, waiting for news that never came. I remember sitting in that gymnasium with my mother, still in my pajamas, because she'd been too worried to make me get dressed. The room was full of parents holding each other, some crying, others just staring at the walls with hollow eyes. The Henderson parents were there, clutching each other so tightly I thought they might break. Mrs. Crawford kept showing everyone pictures of Jenny, as if anyone could forget her bright smile and wild red hair. Sheriff Allen stood at the front of the room, his usually commanding presence diminished by the weight of what he had to say. "We've searched every inch of the bus route," he announced, his voice hoarse. "We've found no evidence of an accident, no skid marks, no debris. It's like the bus just vanished." Someone in the back shouted, "Buses don't just vanish." Sheriff Allen's shoulders sagged. "Ma'am, I wish I had better answers for you. I truly do." That night, lying in my bed while my mother sobbed quietly in the next room, I made a promise to myself. I would never forget my friends. I would never stop looking for them. Somehow, some way, I would find out what happened to bus number 5. The search continued for weeks. Volunteers came from 3 counties away. The FBI sent a team. News crews set up camp in our tiny town, turning our tragedy into a national story. For a while, it seemed like everyone in America was looking for our missing children. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. The search teams went home, the news crews moved on to other stories. The FBI closed the case and labeled it unsolved. Life in Briarwood slowly returned to something resembling normal, but it was a different kind of normal. The kind where parents held their children a little tighter, where nobody talked about the bus route past Miller's Bend, where October 15th became a day of remembrance rather than celebration. I grew up carrying the weight of survival's guilt. Why was I spared? Why did I get to have birthday parties and school dances and graduation when my friends didn't? Why did I get to fall in love, get married, have children of my own, while 23 families were left with nothing but empty bedrooms and fading photographs? The guilt shaped everything I did. I became a teacher, partly because I wanted to protect other people's children the way Mr. Tom had tried to protect us. I moved back to Briarwood after college, even though my husband thought I was crazy. I couldn't leave, not when my friends were still out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Over the years, I followed every lead, no matter how ridiculous it seemed. When someone claimed they'd seen the bus in a field outside of town, I was there with a flashlight before the police arrived. When a psychic said she could sense the children's spirits near the old quarry, I spent an entire weekend searching through the brush. When teenagers dared each other to walk Miller's Bend at midnight, I was usually already there, hoping they might see something I'd missed. My obsession put strain on my marriage. My husband, David, was patient at first, but as the years went by, he grew tired of competing with ghosts. "They're gone, Sarah," he'd say, not unkindly. "You have to let them go." But I couldn't let them go. How could I live a normal life when 23 children were still missing? How could I move on when their parents were still waiting for answers? My mother worried about me. My friends worried about me. Even my own children, when they got old enough to understand, worried about me. But I couldn't stop. Every time I thought about giving up, I'd remember Jenny Crawford's laugh, or the way Marcus Thompson always saved me a seat on the bus, or how the Henderson twins would wave at me from their window every morning. The 20th anniversary of the disappearance brought renewed media attention. Documentaries were made. Books were written. Internet sleuths picked apart every detail of the case, coming up with theories that ranged from plausible to completely insane. Some people thought the children had been kidnapped by a cult. Others believed they'd been taken by human traffickers. A few even suggested alien abduction. But nothing ever led anywhere. The bus and the children remained as lost as ever. Then, about 5 years ago, something changed. The internet had given birth to a new generation of amateur investigators, people with drones and metal detectors and all sorts of high-tech equipment. They started showing up in Briarwood, not in large groups like the old search teams, but 1 or 2 at a time, quietly exploring areas that had been searched dozens of times before. I met most of them. Some were genuine, good-hearted people who wanted to help. Others were just thrill-seekers, looking for their 15 minutes of fame. But all of them left empty-handed, just like everyone else. Until Casey Brennan arrived 3 months ago. Casey was different from the others. He wasn't looking for fame or attention. He was a drone pilot from California in his mid-30s who made his living doing aerial photography for real estate companies. He'd been following the case online for years, not because he thought he could solve it, but because he'd lost his own sister in a car accident when she was 7. He understood the need for closure. "I'm not here to get rich or famous," he told me when we met at the local diner. "I just want to help if I can. I've got some new equipment, better cameras than what they had back in the day. Maybe I can see something that's been missed." I liked him immediately. He had kind eyes, like Mr. Tom, and he didn't make me feel crazy for still caring about something that had happened 40 years ago. "Where do you want to start?" I asked him. He pulled out a map, not just any map, but a detailed topographical survey of the area around Miller's Bend. The official search covered the main road, and about a mile on either side, he said, tracing the area with his finger, "but there are some deeper sections of forest that might not have been thoroughly checked. The terrain is pretty rough, and back in '83, they didn't have the technology we have now." He was right. The original search had been limited by the technology of the time. They'd had helicopters and search dogs, but the forest around Miller's Bend was thick and treacherous. There were ravines hidden by overgrown vegetation, areas where a school bus could have gone off the road and been swallowed by the undergrowth. Casey spent 2 weeks mapping the area with his drone, flying systematic patterns and recording everything. He was methodical, patient, professional. He didn't make wild claims or promise impossible results. He just did his job, 1 square mile at a time. On October 12th, 3 days before the 40th anniversary, he called me. "Sarah," he said, and there was something in his voice that made my heart skip. "I think you need to see this." I drove to Miller's Bend faster than I'd ever driven before. Casey was waiting by the side of the road, his drone equipment spread out on the tailgate of his truck. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly as he held up his tablet. "I found something," he said simply. The screen showed aerial footage of dense forest, the kind I'd seen 1,000 times before. But then Casey zoomed in on one section, and I saw it, a flash of yellow partially hidden beneath the canopy, barely visible through the thick branches. "Oh my God," I whispered. "It's about 2 miles northeast of the main road," Casey said, "deep in the forest, in a ravine that's completely hidden from ground level. The only reason I could see it was because I was flying at just the right angle when the light hit it." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. After 40 years, after countless searches, after all the tears and sleepless nights and unanswered prayers, bus number 5 had finally been found. But finding it was only the beginning. Casey called the police, and within hours, Miller's Bend was swarming with emergency vehicles again. Sheriff Allen had retired years ago, but his replacement, Sheriff Martinez, was just as committed to solving the case. They assembled a team of investigators and made their way through the forest, following Casey's GPS coordinates. I wanted to go with them, but they wouldn't let me. "This is a crime scene now," Sheriff Martinez explained. "We need to preserve the evidence." So I waited by the road with Casey and a growing crowd of reporters and curious onlookers. The families of the missing children had been notified, and some of them were there too. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s, sat in a folding chair someone had brought for her, staring into the forest where her daughters had been found. The wait was agony. Hours passed before the first investigator emerged from the trees, his face grim. Sheriff Martinez came out a few minutes later and walked straight to me. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I need you to prepare yourself. What we found down there, it's not what anyone expected." The bus was intact. That was the first shock. After 40 years in the forest, it should have been rusted through, stripped by vandals, completely deteriorated. But bus number 5 looked almost exactly as it had the day it disappeared. The paint was faded but still clearly yellow. The windows were intact. Even the number 5 was still visible on the front and back. "It's like it was protected somehow," one of the investigators told me later. "The canopy is so thick down there that very little rain gets through. And the way it's positioned in the ravine, it's been shielded from wind and weather." But the condition of the bus wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was what they found inside. The children's belongings were still there, exactly where they'd been left 40 years ago. Lunchboxes sat on seats as if their owners had just stepped away for a moment. Backpacks hung from the backs of chairs, homework assignments still tucked inside. Jenny Crawford's art supplies were scattered across her seat, including a drawing tablet that made everyone who saw it fall silent. The last picture Jenny had drawn was of a dark figure standing beside a winding road. The figure had no face, just a black silhouette, but there was something about the way it was positioned that seemed to suggest it was beckoning, calling someone forward. Around the figure, Jenny had scratched lines that looked like movement, as if the thing was shimmering or vibrating. Mr. Tom's belongings were there too, his thermos of coffee, still half full but long since evaporated, his reading glasses, folded neatly on the dashboard, his cap, sitting on the driver's seat as if he'd just taken it off for a moment. But there were no bodies, no bones, no clothing, no sign of what had happened to the 23 children and their driver. They had simply vanished, leaving behind only their possessions and more questions than ever. The investigation that followed was unlike anything Briarwood had ever seen. The FBI returned with a full forensics team. Anthropologists were brought in to search for any trace of human remains. The bus was carefully transported to a laboratory where every inch of it was examined for clues. But the more they investigated, the more mysterious it became. There were no signs of violence, no evidence of struggle. The bus showed no damage from an accident. There were no skid marks in the ravine, no indication that the bus had crashed or been driven off the road. It's like it was just placed there, one investigator told me. Like someone picked it up and set it down in the forest. The forensics team found something else that chilled everyone involved. Scattered throughout the bus were dozens of handprints, small handprints that matched the size of children's hands. But these weren't normal handprints. They were pressed into the metal of the bus itself, as if the children had been trying to push their way out through solid steel. The handprints were accompanied by something even more disturbing. Carved into the metal walls of the bus, in letters so small they were almost invisible, were names. The names of all 23 missing children, scratched into the steel as if with fingernails. But the names weren't carved from the inside of the bus, they were carved from the outside, as if something had been trying to get in. The discovery of the bus should have brought closure, but instead, it opened up entirely new questions. Where were the children? How had the bus ended up in the ravine without any signs of damage? What had made those handprints and carved those names? The media attention was intense. The story went viral on social media, spawning countless theories and conspiracy videos. Some people thought the children had been taken by a cult that had then hidden the bus in the forest. Others believed they'd been victims of human trafficking, with the bus abandoned to cover up the crime. But the theory that gained the most traction was also the most unsettling. Some people began to suggest that what had happened to bus number 5 wasn't a crime at all, but something else entirely. Something that couldn't be explained by conventional means. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe was among the experts brought in to investigate. She was a forensic anthropologist with 20 years of experience, but she was also something else, a researcher who specialized in unexplained disappearances, cases where people vanished without a trace and were never found. I've seen cases like this before, she told me during one of our conversations. Not exactly like this, but similar. Places where people disappear and leave behind only questions. There's a pattern to it, a consistency that suggests something more than random crime. She showed me her research. Dozens of cases from around the world where groups of people had vanished without explanation. A hiking group in the Canadian Rockies, a family camping in the Australian outback, a school field trip in the Scottish Highlands. The commonalities are always the same, she explained. The disappearances happen in remote locations, usually near areas of geological significance. The victims are often children or young adults. And there's always some trace left behind, personal belongings, vehicles, sometimes even buildings, but never any sign of the people themselves. What do you think happens to them? I asked. Dr. Marlowe was quiet for a long moment. I think they go somewhere else, she said finally. Somewhere we can't follow. Her theory was that certain locations on Earth were what she called thin places, areas where the boundary between our world and something else was weak. She believed that under certain conditions, people could slip through these boundaries and end up in a place that existed alongside our reality but separate from it. It sounds crazy, I know, she admitted. But when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And the truth is, these people don't just disappear, they go somewhere. The investigation continued for months. The FBI brought in every expert they could find. Psychologists, physicists, geologists, even a few people who specialized in what they politely called anomalous phenomena. But none of them could provide a satisfactory explanation for what had happened to bus number 5. The case was officially closed again, labeled unsolved for the second time. The bus was returned to Briarwood, where it was put on display in the town museum as a memorial to the missing children. Families held memorial services. The media moved on to other stories. Life in Briarwood returned to its new normal once again. But I couldn't let it go. Not when we were closer to answers than we'd ever been before. That's when I decided to conduct my own investigation. I started with the location where the bus had been found. Casey had given me the exact GPS coordinates, and I began spending time in the forest, just sitting and observing. I wasn't looking for evidence. The professional investigators had already combed through every inch of the area. I was looking for something else, something that couldn't be measured or photographed or put in an evidence bag. I was looking for the truth. The ravine where bus number 5 had been discovered was unlike anywhere else in the forest. It was deeper than the surrounding terrain, forming a natural bowl in the earth. The trees grew differently there too, taller and more densely packed, creating a canopy so thick that very little sunlight reached the ground even in the middle of the day. But there was something else about the place, something that made my skin crawl every time I visited. It was too quiet. Forests are never completely silent. There are always birds singing, insects buzzing, small animals moving through the undergrowth. But the ravine was different. The silence there was absolute, as if all the life in the forest had learned to avoid that particular spot. I started keeping a journal of my visits, recording everything I observed. The temperature was always cooler in the ravine, even on hot summer days. The air felt thicker somehow, as if it was under pressure. And there were times, usually just after sunset, when I swear I could hear things that weren't there. The sound of children laughing, the hiss of hydraulic brakes, the voice of Mr. Tom calling out attendants. I told myself I was imagining things, that grief and guilt were playing tricks on my mind. But the sounds were so clear, so real, that I started bringing a tape recorder with me to try to capture them. The recordings never picked up anything unusual, but I kept hearing the sounds anyway. Then, one evening in late November, something happened that changed everything. I was sitting in the ravine just as the sun was setting, listening to the silence and trying to make sense of it all. The temperature was dropping, and I was about to head back to my car when I heard it, the sound of footsteps in the leaves. I looked up and saw a figure standing at the edge of the ravine, silhouetted against the dying light. For a moment my heart stopped. The figure was small, child-sized, and wearing what looked like a school uniform. "Jenny?" I whispered, even though I knew it was impossible. The figure didn't respond, but it didn't disappear either. It just stood there, perfectly still, as if it was waiting for something. I slowly got to my feet and took a step forward. "Jenny, is that you?" The figure raised one hand, and I saw that it was waving at me. Not a hello wave, but a goodbye wave. The kind of wave you give someone when you're going on a long trip and you don't know when you'll see them again. I tried to walk toward the figure, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Each step was a struggle, as if I was walking through invisible quicksand. By the time I reached the edge of the ravine, the figure was gone. But in the soft earth where it had been standing, I found something that made my blood run cold. A small handprint pressed into the dirt as if the child had been trying to hold on to something. The handprint was tiny, delicate, exactly the size Jenny Crawford's would have been at 8 years old. I called Dr. Marlowe immediately. She drove out from the city that same night, bringing a team of investigators with her. They photographed the handprint, took soil samples, set up monitoring equipment throughout the ravine. "This is exactly what I expected to find," Dr. Marlowe told me as we watched her team work. "The pattern is always the same. First the disappearance, then the discovery of physical evidence, and finally, contact." Contact? The missing people trying to communicate with our world. It usually happens decades after the initial disappearance, as if it takes them time to figure out how to reach across the barrier between their world and ours. She explained that in many of the cases she'd studied, there had been similar incidents. Family members reporting glimpses of missing loved ones, usually in the same location where they'd disappeared. The sightings were always brief, always just out of reach, as if the missing people were trying to let their families know they were still alive, but couldn't quite bridge the gap between worlds. "I think your friends are trying to tell you something," Dr. Marlowe said. "The question is, what?" Over the next few months, I spent more time in the ravine than I did in my own home. My husband was worried about me, my children were concerned, my friends thought I was losing my mind. But I couldn't stay away. Every evening, just as the sun was setting, I would make my way to the spot where bus number 5 had been found and wait. Most nights nothing happened, but sometimes, maybe once a week, I would see them. The children, standing at the edge of the ravine, watching me with sad eyes. They never came closer, and they never spoke, but they were there. I was sure of it. I started leaving things for them. Small toys, pieces of candy, drawings of my own. I would place them on the spot where I'd seen the handprint and come back the next day to find them gone. Not scattered by animals or blown away by wind, but carefully taken, as if by loving hands. The other families started coming too. Word had spread through Briarwood about what I was experiencing, and soon other parents and siblings were making pilgrimages to the ravine. Some of them saw things too. A flash of blonde hair that looked like Amy Henderson, a small figure clutching a toy car like Marcus Thompson used to do. We started calling it the visits. They became a regular part of life in Briarwood, a way for families to maintain connection with the children they'd lost. The town council designated the ravine as a memorial site, and a small plaque was installed near the spot where the bus had been found. But I wanted more than brief glimpses and shadowy figures. I wanted real answers. I wanted to know what had happened to my friends, where they had gone, and most importantly, if there was any way to bring them back. That's when I decided to try something that everyone, including Dr. Marlowe, thought was incredibly dangerous. I decided to try to follow them. The idea came to me during one of the visits, when I saw Jenny Crawford standing at the edge of the ravine with her arms outstretched, as if she was trying to show me something. She seemed to be gesturing toward a specific spot in the forest, a place where the trees grew in an almost perfect circle around a small clearing. I had noticed the clearing before, but I'd never paid much attention to it. It was just another part of the forest, no different from anywhere else. But as I watched Jenny point toward it, I realized that all of the sightings, all of the visits, had one thing in common. The children always appeared between the ravine and the clearing, as if they were trying to guide me toward something specific. The next day, I hiked to the clearing alone. It was about a quarter-mile from the ravine, hidden by thick underbrush and accessible only by a narrow deer path. When I finally reached it, I understood why Jenny had been pointing toward it. The clearing was perfectly circular, about 30 feet in diameter. The trees that surrounded it were all the same age, all the same height, as if they had been planted at the same time. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that nothing grew in the center of the clearing. No grass, no flowers, no weeds, just bare earth that looked like it had been swept clean. I stood in the center of the clearing and immediately felt something that made my skin crawl. The air was different here, thicker, almost viscous. The silence was even more complete than in the ravine. And there was something else, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It felt like I was being watched. I looked around, but there was no one else there, just me and the trees and the unnatural silence. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing minute. It was as if invisible eyes were studying me, evaluating me, deciding whether I was worthy of some kind of revelation. Then I heard it, a sound that made my heart stop. The rumble of a diesel engine. I spun around, searching for the source of the sound, but there was nothing there. The clearing was empty, the forest was silent, but the sound continued, growing louder and more distinct. It was definitely a bus engine, the same low rumble that had been the soundtrack to my childhood mornings. The sound seemed to be coming from all around me, as if the clearing itself was generating it. I closed my eyes and listened, and gradually I began to hear other sounds mixed in with the engine noise. Children's voices, laughter, the squeak of vinyl seats, the hiss of hydraulic brakes. And then, clear as day, I heard Mr. Tom's voice calling out attendance. Jenny Crawford? Here. Marcus Thompson? Here. Amy Henderson? Here. Alice Henderson? Here. The roll call continued through all 23 names, each child responding in turn. Their voices were exactly as I remembered them, Jenny's soft and musical, Marcus's shy and quiet, the Henderson twins speaking in perfect unison. And then Mr. Tom called out one more name. Sarah Mitchell? The question hung in the air, waiting for an answer that never came. Because I wasn't there. I was homesick, tucked into bed with a fever and a cough, while my friends took a journey I wasn't meant to share. The sounds faded gradually, like a radio being turned down. The clearing returned to its unnatural silence. But something had changed. The air felt different, less oppressive. The feeling of being watched was gone, replaced by something else. The feeling of being invited. I stood in the center of the clearing for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. The logical part of my mind told me it was all in my head, that grief and guilt were creating auditory hallucinations. But a deeper part of me, the part that had always known my friends were still out there somewhere, recognized the truth. They were calling to me. After 40 years, they were finally calling me home. I spent the next week preparing for what I knew would be my final visit to the clearing. I wrote letters to my family, explaining what I was going to do and why. I updated my will, settled my affairs, and made arrangements for my children to be taken care of. I wasn't planning to die. I was planning to disappear. On the night of March 15th, exactly 40 years and 5 months after the original disappearance, I drove to Miller's Bend one last time. I parked my car by the side of the road and walked into the forest, carrying nothing but a flashlight and a small backpack containing a few personal items. The ravine was silent as I passed through it, heading toward the clearing. But as I got closer, I began to hear sounds, familiar sounds that made my heart race with anticipation. The sounds of children playing. When I reached the clearing, they were there waiting for me. All 23 of them, exactly as I remembered them from 40 years ago. Jenny Crawford with her red hair and bright smile. Marcus Thompson clutching his toy car. Amy and Alice Henderson holding hands. And Mr. Tom, standing behind them all with his kind eyes and patient expression. "We've been waiting for you," Jenny said, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing. "We've been waiting for so long." I walked toward them, and for the first time in 40 years, I felt complete. The guilt that had haunted me, the questions that had tormented me, the grief that had defined my life, all of it fell away as I saw my friends whole and happy, and exactly as they should be. "Where have you been?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Somewhere safe," Mr. Tom said, his voice as gentle as ever. "Somewhere we could wait for you." "But I'm not 8 years old anymore," I said, suddenly self-conscious about my gray hair and wrinkled face. "I'm not a child like you." Jenny smiled. "That doesn't matter. You're still our friend. You're still one of us." They surrounded me then, 23 children and one kind old man, their hands reaching out to welcome me home. I felt their touch, warm and real, and more solid than anything I'd experienced in 40 years. "Are you ready?" Mr. Tom asked. I looked back toward the forest, toward the life I was leaving behind. My husband, my children, my grandchildren, I loved them all, but they had never been able to fill the hole left by my missing friends. They had lives of their own, full and rich and complete without me. But here, in this clearing, I had found the people who had been waiting for me since I was 8 years old, the people who had saved a seat for me on a bus I was never meant to miss. "I'm ready," I said. Mr. Tom smiled and opened the door of bus number 5, which had somehow appeared in the clearing without me noticing. The yellow paint gleamed in the darkness, as bright and cheerful as the day it had first rolled off the assembly line. "All aboard," he said, just like he had every morning for 23 years. I climbed onto the bus and took my seat, the fourth seat on the right, the one that had always been mine. Jenny was in front of me, Marcus behind me, the Henderson twins across the aisle. Everyone was exactly where they belonged. Mr. Tom settled into the driver's seat and started the engine. The familiar rumble filled the air, the sound of home and safety and belonging. Through the windows, I could see the clearing fading away, replaced by something else, a road I'd never seen before, leading to a place I'd never been, but had always known was waiting for me. "Next stop forever," Mr. Tom announced, and we all laughed because we knew he was right. The bus pulled away from the clearing, carrying us toward whatever comes after. I pressed my face to the window and watched the forest disappear, replaced by landscapes that shifted and changed like dreams. But I wasn't afraid. I was with my friends, and we were finally going home. As we drove, I felt the years falling away from me. The grief, the guilt, the weight of living without the people I loved most, all of it dissolved until I was 8 years old again, sitting on a school bus with my best friends, heading toward an adventure that would last forever. The last thing I remember is the sound of children's laughter and the feeling of being exactly where I belonged. 3 days later, they found my car parked by Miller's Bend, keys in the ignition, doors unlocked. Inside, they discovered a note I'd written, explaining where I'd gone and why. Meta. Titles. 23 kids vanished on school bus. What drone found 40 years later will shock you. School bus disappeared with 23 children. The truth hidden in forest for 40 years. I should have been child. 24. My friends vanished on bus. Number 5. Entire school bus of children vanished without trace. Survivor reveals what really happened. Missing school bus found after 40 years. But where are the 23 children? Ranked titles. 23 kids vanished on school bus. What drone found 40 years later will shock you. Combines specific numbers, mystery, modern technology discovery, and emotional payoff promise. I should have been child. 24. My friends vanished on bus. Number 5. Personal survivor angle creates immediate emotional connection and curiosity about the specific numbered reference. School bus disappeared with 23 children, the truth hidden in forest for 40 years, strong mystery set up with specific details and promise of revelation after long time period. Missing school bus found after 40 years, but where are the 23 children? Good hook, but question format may be less compelling than definitive shock promise. Entire school bus of children vanished without trace. Survivor reveals what really happened. Solid but lacks the specific numbers and modern discovery angle that make other titles more compelling. Final title. 23 kids vanished on school bus. What drone found 40 years later will shock you. Description. On October 15, 1983, 23 children and their bus driver vanished without a trace in the small town of Briarwood. No bodies, no wreckage, no explanation. Just an empty road, and families torn apart by unanswered questions. Sarah Mitchell was supposed to be the 24th child on that bus, but stayed home sick that day. For 40 years, she carried the guilt of survival and never stopped searching for her missing friends. Then 3 months ago, a drone pilot captured something in the forest that changed everything. What they discovered about bus number 5 defies all logical explanation and raises disturbing questions about what really happened to those children. This is Sarah's story, a haunting tale of loss, obsession, and the desperate need for closure that spans 4 decades. You'll learn about the original disappearance, the decades-long search efforts, the shocking discovery that reignited the investigation, and the inexplicable evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about missing persons cases. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved, but sometimes the truth finds a way to surface. Hashtags: missing children, mystery stories, paranormal, true crime, vanishing, unsolved, school bus, mystery, disappearance, supernatural, tags. Missing children, school bus mystery, vanishing stories, unexplained disappearances, paranormal mystery, true crime stories, unsolved cases, missing persons, supernatural events, mysterious disappearances, 1983 mystery, bus number 5, Briarwood mystery, drone discovery, forest mystery, childhood mystery, survivor story, unexplained phenomena, creepy stories, real mystery, upload time. 2020, 5, 7, 8, tone, 00Z.